Today I want to do a quick video about what people are afraid of, especially new hikers, what people's fears are backpacking, and what you really should be afraid of. What people are afraid of are things that really aren't really dangerous, and they really aren't things you should be afraid of. Things like... Okay, so before we even get to out to the backcountry, we have to worry about getting to the backcountry. And your biggest danger in going backpacking is driving to the trailhead. So the second biggest danger, I think, is ourselves, what we do, the decisions we make. So you just have to think rationally. The things that people are afraid of, I'm looking at a perspective of the Sierra Nevada, hiking in the Sierra Nevada, which is where I usually go. Things like on the John Muir Trail or mostly on-trail hiking. So that's the perspective we're looking at. So from in California. So the usual things that people are afraid of from somebody that's experienced in hiking in the Sierra, the number one thing that probably comes up is bears. People are afraid of bears, but with the canister programs, I don't worry about bears at all. They're a nuisance if they sometimes come into your camp. They hardly ever do. I was up hiking in the Sierra in September and ran across of about 10 different groups of PCTers, and they had done the whole PCT. They were coming back to finish the Sierra because it was a high snow year, so they skipped it and came back and finished in the Sierra. And a lot of them hadn't seen a bear their entire trip. I was lucky and got to see bears in Yosemite on that trip, but you don't see them that much in the backcountry. They're not interested in you. What you really need to be worried about is little critters like rodents and marmots. They're going to get into your stuff. They're going to deer will chew up your hiking poles because there's salt on them from your sweat. Rodents will get into your pack, chew the straps, and get into your food. So those are the things, those are bigger fears than bears to me. People worry about snakes, ticks, things like that. When you're talking about the high Sierra, you're usually high enough where you're not going to see those things. Rattlesnakes don't typically go over about 7,000 feet. I think the highest I've ever seen one is 7,000 feet. But you'll rarely see them. You might see one coming out of Yosemite Valley up until you hit about Tuolumne Meadows. But they're not a worry. Just be aware of where they are. In the high Sierra, there's no other poisonous snakes in California. So if you see a snake, enjoy it. Don't mess with it. Don't kill it. They're just part of nature, and you're lucky to see them. So the other stuff that people are afraid of is being afraid of the dark. If you're solo hiking, getting used to the solitude. There's ways to fight that. You'll see people on a lot of trails. You bring books, magazines, things to read. I actually bring a little iPod. I know it's sacrilegious to some, but other people don't hear it. It's how I unwind at the end of the day. I'll listen to something like that. And it comes in really handy on stormy nights where it's windy and your tent's flapping. I'll pop in my earbuds and fall asleep to that. So other things people are afraid of are axe murderers and maybe other hikers. But those really aren't something you need to be afraid of. The great majority of people, once you get away from trailheads, are super cool, and you really don't have to worry about that. Being a man, maybe don't have a good perspective from being a solo woman. I do hike solo occasionally. It's different for women. They do have to be aware, but lots of women are doing it, and just use common sense and make good decisions. I think you're safe. So the way to get over all these fears, though, a lot of people are fearful of these things because they haven't hiked a lot. It's funny, when I go, I don't hear anything at night. Bears can come through my camp, deer stomping around. I usually don't hear anything because I know there's nothing to worry about. So you got to get used to that stuff. So those aren't the things you really got to be worried about. The reason you need to get over those fears is to be able to get to places like this. Just check this place out. It's freaking awesome. Beautiful place. This is Second Lake, by the way, on the North Fork Pine Creek Trail. Pretty spectacular. So I'm going to go over some things that you might not think about. Some of these will seem obvious when I say them, but these little things can sometimes ruin a trip. end a trip or make a trip really uncomfortable. So let's get into the things that you really need to worry about on a Sierra Nevada longer backpacking trip. So here's an interesting stat that men need to worry about. Us men are 3 times more likely to be injured in the backcountry. I don't know why. You have to ask yourself, we're stupid, we take chances. So like I said, some of our biggest dangers is ourselves, and that's especially true for men. So one of the things people worry about is getting lost. So the problem with getting lost is getting found if you do get lost, in the very unlikely scenario that you do get lost. So the first thing that I always tell everybody to do, tell your loved ones or coworkers when you're going, when you're going to be back. Say you did get hurt and you were solo and you fell off a cliff. If nobody knows to look for you, it's going to be a long, slow death. So the other thing that people can do is leave a note on their car where the wilderness permit you get, rangers don't come out and check if you didn't come home. Somebody has to tell them that you're missing. So you leave a note in your car where you're going. So that's always a good thing to help get you rescued if you have to get rescued. So I shouldn't have to tell people this, but getting lost on trails is hard to do, but obviously you better bring a map and a compass and know how to use it. You're going to run into a lot of other hikers too. They're really helpful, and it shouldn't be that big of a deal. There's all kinds of GPS technologies right now. Spot devices. DeLorme has a device to track you in the wilderness. Those are ways of even kind of hiking for dummies. You can use those things and just hit a help button and people can come and find you. But never use those as just, if you get lost, you don't just instantly hit a button. You try and get found first and use your maps and common sense to try and get unlost. So the idea is to not get lost in the first place. So, okay, let's go on to some things that can cause problems on your hike. All right, next danger, this stuff right here. This is one of the biggest hazards to hikers. The number one thing is water, and there's lots of ways water can be a big danger. The obvious one, last season, 2017 hiking season in the Sierra, water and snow was a record year, and there was some extremely dangerous hiking and water crossings. Water crossings were dangerous. We lost 2 hikers. One was in Kings Canyon and another on the JMT. Another one was on the PCT in Yosemite, of people crossing rivers that they didn't have the skills to, or they didn't by themselves. And so if you're going early in the season when the rivers are high, please check on how to cross a river safely. I have a video on how to cross a river safely, but do not exceed your abilities. Other things with water, obviously treatment, you better know how to treat your water. Dehydration, not drinking enough water. That's actually a big problem that can screw up your trip. You're gonna have some minor health issues with dehydration. You won't feel good, but it also contributes to altitude sickness, which is another thing that can make a trip unpleasant, if not force you to leave. I've seen people have to hike out because they get altitude sickness so bad. So always drink lots and lots of water. Most places in the Sierra, there's plenty of water. You can also almost always carry at least 2 liters. I usually carry 1 liter in most areas, unless I always research where the long stretches are. On the JMT, there's only 2 stretches where you have to carry 2 liters, in my opinion, depending on how many miles you can cover. So Sierra water is plentiful, and just drink a lot of water to help with altitude sickness. So the thing on altitude sickness, I always spend 1 night over 10,000 feet before any trip into the Sierra. So like on a Friday, we'll leave work. Sometimes we might pull into a campsite like a Tioga Pass or something that's 10,000 feet and just sleep there and then head to the trailhead. It's better than nothing. Anytime you're hiking over about 9,000 feet, you got to worry about the altitude sickness. So you got to ease your way into it. So consider acclimating at least 1 to 2 days at a high elevation, preferably around 10,000 feet, and even hike around a little bit if you can. But if you're out in the backcountry and you get altitude sickness, it doesn't have to be the end of your trip. You can always hike down to a lower elevation, so you hike high, sleep low. That works really well, and ease your way up to the high altitude. You don't want to go from sea level and have your starting trailhead being 10,000 feet at a place like Horseshoe Meadows and Cottonwood Lakes without acclimating. So be aware of that being an issue. So the other thing with water is you can get giardiasis, it's called. It's a waterborne parasite that is really unpleasant if you don't treat the water. It looks, all the Sierra water looks pure, but you got to treat your water. I sometimes, over 10,000 feet, if I look on a map and I know there's no activities farther upstream, I may drink some untreated water. But just with all the great water treatment options, it's not worth the risk. So be careful of that water. All right, I shouldn't even have to talk about this one, but I've seen more people have a bad time on a long hike because of problems with your feet. Obviously, that's the thing you're walking on for the whole time. You got to take care of your feet. That means keeping them dry, not sweating too much, drying off after water crossings, making sure your shoes are broken in. And you don't buy a new pair of shoes and take them on a day hike and say they're okay. You got to take them out on an overnight trip, going up and down hills, to make sure they don't cause blisters. And find out what shoes work for you. I use inserts in all my shoes. I have a video strictly about foot care and blisters if you want to check it out. It's good advice and what works for me. But taking care of your feet, that means as soon as you get a hot spot, stopping and taking care of it. I've been hiking so long, I can't understand how I see so many people with blisters on trails like the John Muir Trail. I don't get blisters anymore. I hike a lot. That's from learning how to take care of my feet. And it's really, to me, it's just a matter of keeping crap out of my shoes, taking care of a hot spot when I get a hot spot, and keeping my feet dry and having the right footwear. On having success and not having blisters, it's figuring out your sock routine. What's worked for me is a thin pair of socks. I use only darn tough socks now. That just works for me. Some people like to use like a thicker sock with over a silk liner, kind of a double layer thing. That works for some people. Again, you have to get out and try it, and that includes going up and down hills. So the socks, don't underestimate just having good footwear. Socks are very, very important too. So. One of the other things that people do, they either bring too much crap or not enough crap. I've seen lots of people fail and have to end a long trip because they carry too much stuff. And they just wear themselves out and they can't do it. They just want it. Maybe you're afraid of your skill set and you decide to bring everything. Maybe you think it'll be comfortable to bring everything. You have to decide which things to bring and which things not to bring. The other thing I see a lot more lately because a lot of people are trying to go ultralight, is people aren't bringing enough stuff. So I try to plan for the worst. Now, like a lot of people can live with just a tarp. That's a lot lighter than a tent. On a 2 to 3 week trip in the Sierra, you're going to get some thunderstorms and some rain at some point on that trip. If that's your comfort level, maybe it's mosquito season and you don't mind having mosquitoes flying around, that's a decision you have to make. But the more important decision is clothing, to be able to prepare in your tent and your shelter and your sleeping system, to be able to prepare for the worst days. For example, I went on a mid-September trip last year in Yosemite, and I did look at the weather forecast, and they were forecasting a couple inches of snow, and we were out for 8 days, and it was the later part of the trip where the forecast was for a couple inches of snow. No big deal in September. If this was October, I would take it very seriously. Later in the year, you got to take storms really seriously. If there's a storm in the forecast past late September into October, I don't go. I don't want to do snow camping, and it can be quite dangerous. But before our trip, I heard there was snow in the forecast, and I decided to bring my fleece, which in the middle of summer, I might not bring my fleece and try to get by with just a down jacket. So a lot of people try to go ultralight. They might just bring one shirt on a long sleeve and a light jacket. But we got, in mid-September, we got a foot of snow, and it was in the 15 to 20 degree range for 3 days. It was cold. So I did bring a bigger pack to bring a few more items. I brought another long sleeve technical piece of clothing, and I bought my fleece and a down jacket. And that turned out to be a good decision. However, we weren't able to complete the loop we were supposed to make. So I want to let you know, even experienced hikers sometimes screw up. We exited a different way because we couldn't get out the way we wanted to go out to close our loop, because there was 2 very high passes we had to cross. So we came out on the PCT into Yosemite instead, because it's a well-traveled trail, and we weren't planning on going that direction, and I didn't bring a map to that area. Luckily, I was familiar with that area, and it's a well-signed trail. So, and there was people on the trail. We ran into some people, so that was a boo-boo on my part. So I should have brought that extra map for that area, even though that's the thing you need to know about escape routes. You need to know your escape routes in case bad weather does come on, especially for you late season hikers. So just an example of bringing what you're comfortable with sleeping in. That'll help you get over some of your fears too about being out in the woods. One of the things I taught my daughter is that our gear is really good. We know how to use our gear, and even in the worst weather, we can set up and ride out any storm for several days. And our sleeping bags, tent are very warm, and we can ride out any storm down to 0 degrees. So it gives you some confidence, and that's a mistake some people do if they don't bring enough stuff. A storm comes, they try to hike out over a pass, a blizzard turns up, then all of a sudden you have a whiteout. You can't set up because you're on some pass with cliffs everywhere. People have died in the Sierra because of things like that. So you got to know how to use your gear. You got to know how to use it before you go. So you just got to go on a lot of trips. Get over all those other fears about being afraid of the dark and being by yourself, and practice using your gear. And never hike out into a storm, up into a thunderstorm. Just settle down in a valley, hike down lower, and find a safe place to camp and just ride it out. So the other thing that sometimes can happen from not bringing enough gear, hypothermia is a real concern even in September, August, July in the Sierra. It can snow any day of the year on top of Mount Whitney and some of the high peaks in the Sierra. It doesn't usually, but it's not unusual that you get some weather down in the 20s. You throw in a little rainstorm and some wind, you get some wind chill going, and you have the wrong type of clothing, or you don't have enough gear, your tent springs a leak, or you don't have a tent, you're sleeping on a tarp, and you get wet, or you fall in a river, crossing a river, you can get hypothermia and you can die. It's hard to start a fire in a snowstorm or a rainstorm when all your crap's wet. So that's why make sure you bring enough stuff. If you're going ultralight, you better bring really quality gear that isn't going to get you killed. So don't want to scare you, but this stuff's important. So the other thing on long hikes is that ends a lot of people's trips are injuries. And a lot of times they don't have to end your trip. You just got to pay attention to your body. Maybe you twist an ankle or something like that, and you try to ignore it, or you're just not feeling right. You need to take a 0 day and evaluate what's really going on. You don't want to get worse and then be out in the middle of nowhere and have to hike 2 or 3 days on something that's hurting. But I bring naproxen, anti-inflammatories, Tylenol, ibuprofen. Most hikers, they call that candy on the PCT, ibuprofen. You need to pay attention to that. I bring some knee braces for my bad knees. Know your body. Don't ignore symptoms. try to treat them. And a lot of times just taking a 0 day, getting to bed early and resting will allow your body to recover and you can continue on your trip. So another thing that people don't think about coming out here to the Sierra, if you don't come out here a lot, is our sun out here in the Sierra. It's very, very low humidity and dry in the Sierra in the summertime up high, and the sun is extremely intense. If you don't have sunscreen and you don't have lip balm and you don't have clothing to cover up your body, you are going to get fried and you're going to get dehydrated and your skin will dry out, your lips will chap. You must protect yourself from those things, so you need to wear a hat and the right kind of clothing, or else at least have a good base tan. Don't underestimate the power of the sun. It's pretty intense. It also contributes to you getting dehydrated. So, one other thing I want to talk about: snow. When people, last year was an especially snowy year, so a lot of people were out in the Sierras when it was pretty dangerous. So it's if you're going to go out when there's snow on the ground, you got to know how to travel safely on snow. It includes even if you're hiking on trails, the trails are covered when there's snow on the ground. So you better be able to navigate. So that means map and compass, GPSs. Don't rely just on GPS stuff, because that stuff goes dead, batteries die. I strongly suggest learning a map and compass skills as a backup in case your batteries die. A lot of people are using gut hook and stuff like that, which is great, but I don't even know how to use that stuff. I'm still a map and compass guy. So when you're hiking on snow, little things like a trail that's routine in the summertime, maybe you're going up over a pass, might have a big run out, and you're on a little thin path. You got to look down and see where that goes. Usually those runouts go 1,000 feet down a cliff into some rocks. You can't afford to fall. So what time of the season are you going? Are you going to be able to get by with like micro spikes on your shoes, or are you going to need full-on crampons and an ice axe? Crampons and ice axes are just dead weight if you don't know how to use them. So don't even bother taking them if you don't know how to use them. Sometimes you can get by using a hiking pole to self-arrest, but if you don't self-arrest immediately on a slope like that, you're toast. So learn the right skills at the right time of the year. The other thing that's really, really dangerous is crossing over rivers, over snow bridges, especially when things are starting to thaw out. So just be careful of that one. Lightning and weather should be an obvious one. Stay off the peaks during lightning storms. Our Sierra weather is typical in the summer to have afternoon lightning storms. They're usually very brief, anywhere between about 1 in the afternoon to about 6 at night. They can come in for a couple hours. So you try and get over the high passes at those times. If a storm comes, take some shelter. Don't stand under a single tree. Try to stand under a group of trees. Don't stand out in the open. If you're in a group, separate, because if a lightning strike does happen, you don't want to all get hit. If you spread out, one guy gets hit, the other guys can revive you. And keep your feet together, touching each other, because that way the bolt doesn't go all the way through your body. It'll just ground out on your feet. And stand on a pad or something if you have one. But research that, because you're going to see some lightning storms. It's nothing to be afraid of. I love lightning storms in the Sierra, but I've been stuck on some passes during them, and it's scary as shit. You can die. Sometimes I've had my hair standing up. You get the hell out of there as soon as you can and take some shelter. So be careful of that. All right, this is one a lot of people don't think about. They find a good camping spot, they're tired at the end of the day, and they don't make a good choice. They find an open spot and they pitch their tent. People get killed in their tents quite often. Something falls on them. Obviously you don't want to camp right on the bottom of a cliff where you see boulder and rock fall everywhere, or at the top of a cliff where you might relieve yourself in the middle of the night and relieve yourself of your life. So, but those are pretty obvious. One that's not so obvious is do not pitch your tent, especially on windy nights. If it's windy, be real careful. Look at the trees. Make sure there's not any leaners or something that could fall on your tent. But these trees are especially dangerous because they can fall even if it's not windy. They're called red firs, also known as silver tips, because they're really pretty. They make pretty Christmas trees, but they fall all the time. Don't camp under these trees. You can find you know when you're in a red fir forest is because you'll see litter everywhere on the ground. That's a red fur there. Notice the top just decided to break off. And there's stuff all over the ground here. There's another red fur off in the distance that the top is snapped off. There's a couple over there. I noticed a couple trees leaning up against each other. And there's the young trees. They look like little Christmas trees. They're pretty, unless they're falling on top of your head. So you see all the crap on the ground around here. That's how, just look around on the ground. If you see a lot of down timber, it's probably a red fir forest. This one isn't obvious to everybody. Hygiene is really important on the trail. Not just because you want to scare away everybody. Nobody likes a stinky hiker, but we all stink out in the backcountry. Your hygiene is something to worry about, but you also got to worry about other people's hygiene. A lot of people think they get sick from drinking bad water. Most people get stomach intestinal problems from bad hygiene. So learn how to go to the bathroom without and be able to not have any fecal matter on your stuff. That's where it comes in handy to be careful what your partners are doing. You're sharing food and utensils, or that PCT hiker comes through with a bag of gorp and says, "Here, have a handful." You don't know where that stuff's been or where their hands have been. Best to know where all your stuff is touched. It's actually a really problem. It could be a very unpleasant thing out in the backcountry. I always bring Imodium just in case something like that happens, because that's the worst thing that can happen in the backcountry is to have intestinal issues. Another thing that doesn't seem like that big a deal, but I've had it happen, we call it crotch rot. It's from wearing crappy underwear. I spend $30 on underwear for backpacking. It goes down longer and it keeps my thighs from rubbing together. If you get some crappy underwear that don't dry out, I sweat a lot, and you can chafe. And when that gets raw, the salt from your sweat goes in there, and you can just be freaking miserable. So spend some money on some good quality underwear that breathes well and dries from the inside out, so you can stay dry down there. There's some products that deal with that stuff. One of them's called Glide, that causes you to have less friction. So other things that you need to remember, things like if you have allergies, maybe you got a bee allergy. There are bees in this Sierra. I'll be up on a peak and weird little bugs will be floating up in the wind. I don't see honeybees too often out there, but if something that you have an allergy to, maybe a food allergy, and you need to make sure you need to bring those things in your first aid kit. A lot of people go pretty weak on their first aid kits, and that could be problems when you need it. It doesn't weigh that much to have little packages of all the things you need. So be aware of the things that you need at home. You may or may not need them in the backcountry. So last thing that should be obvious for people that have been in this Sierra ever is mosquitoes, depending on your time of the year. They can be out any time of the year, but in the springtime when the snow just melts, they are thick and it can be miserable and they can ruin your trip. So you gotta just learn how to deal with them. It's camp away from meadows, next to lakes. You want to be up on ridge lines. Wind is your friend in mosquito country. The windier the better, it kind of keeps them away. Usually they're not as bad during the middle of the day, but you're going to always have them in the morning and the evening. And here's a good tip. I've known this from experience. I usually take a crap at night or first thing in the morning. That's when the mosquitoes are the worst. And some people don't like DEET. You can wear long sleeves, head nets, cover your hands. But when you take a crap, you got to pull your pants and underwear down. And one time we were at the Ray Lakes and they were thick there. And got it out as fast as I can, but I must have got 30 bites. I was covered in mosquitoes at just that moment. So if you're in mosquito country, try to do your business on times of the day where the mosquitoes aren't out, maybe while you're hiking. Find a place where it's windy, or in the middle of the day they're usually not as bad. So these are just some of the things. I just want you to get your mindset on things that may or may not be a problem when you're out on the trail. But those other fears, they're not an issue really. It's just a matter of getting used to them. So the Sierras are awesome. Come out and enjoy them. And if you prepare and think about these little issues, you're going to have a good time. And it's pretty hard not to have a good time in this area. It's freaking beautiful up here. So if you have any other questions or add to this discussion in the comments with some of the other things that I may have forgot, the little things that can pop up that can ruin your trip. But remember, you are the one that makes the decisions what you do out there. So your brain is your biggest friend or enemy out there on whether or not you make good decisions. I've done many stupid things in the backcountry. The older I get, the not wiser I get. I just don't like pain and suffering. So I make better decisions these days and don't try to power through stupid things. And my trips are safer and funner as a result of me being older and lazier, I guess. But I call it being smarter. But whatever, it's all worth it. So hope this helps, and enjoy your trips. Thanks for watching.